We will now determine f of x given that cosine squared 4x minus sine squared 4x equals cosine of f of x. So let's see how to determine the f of x. First, let's consider the left side expression. Here we have cosine squared 4x minus sine squared 4x. I'm going to write each of these factors as multiples of the term. That is, cosine squared 4x can be written as cosine 4x times cosine 4x minus, I'm going to write sine squared 4x as sine 4x times sine 4x, and on the right side we have cosine of f of x. Now I'm going to use the trigonometric difference identity. That is, we know that cosine of x plus y, and this equals cosine x cosine y minus sine x sine y. And in this identity, I'm going to replace x and y by 4x. So therefore, I get cosine of 4x plus y is also replaced as 4x. And so this gives cosine 4x, replace y by 4x. So it becomes cosine 4x minus sine, replace x by 4x and y by 4x. So we get sine 4x, sine 4x. Now, if we compare these two expressions, that is cosine 4x minus sine 4x, sine 4x, with the left side expression, we see that both are equal. And this means this can be written, because since this is equal to this much, I can write down this, or I can put this in simplified form as this can be written as cosine of 4x plus 4x, which is 8x. And on the right side, we have cosine of f of x. Now, on both sides, we have the cosine function, which means the inner part of the cosine function should be the same. That is, 8x has to be equal to f of x. So, 8x equals f of x. Or otherwise, we say that f of x equals 8x. So we have determined f of x equals 8x for part A. Let's do part B. Here we have cosine power 4x minus sine power 4x equals cosine of g of x. We then have to find g of x. So let's use the hint part for this question. That is, it is given as a power 4 minus b power 4, and this equals a squared minus b squared times a squared plus b squared. I'm going to use this hint. That is, consider a power 4 as cosine power 4x. This is a power 4 minus sine power 4x. Sine power 4x is b power 4. So therefore, using this a power 4 minus b power 4, we can write down this left side expression, that is cosine power 4x minus sine power 4x, and this equals a squared minus b squared. Here we see that a equal to cosine 4x. So therefore, a squared, that is a equals cosine 4x, and b equals sine 4x. So when we use this identity, we have to first write this a squared minus b squared. So considering this as a and this as b, I write down a squared minus b squared, which is cosine squared 4x minus sine squared 4x. Now let's write the next term, that is a squared plus b squared. So therefore this will become cosine squared 4x plus sine squared 4x, and this equals, on the right side we have cosine of g of x. Now we can use the Pythagorean identity to simplify this. That is, we know that cosine squared x plus sine squared x, and this equals 1. This is one of the Pythagorean identity. And here if we replace x and x by 4x, we will get this will become cosine squared of 4x plus sine squared of 4x, and this equals 1. And this means we now see that cosine squared 4x plus sine squared 4x equal to 1. So instead of this one, I can put this as 1. And so we will have this term multiplied with 1, we will have only this term, that is cosine squared 4x minus of sine squared 4x. And this equals, on the right side, we have cosine of g of x. And if we look at this left side expression, considering part A, we have already determined that cosine squared 4x minus sine squared 4x, which we have written as cosine 4x minus sine 4x and sine 4x, and this equals cosine of 4x plus 4x, which is cosine 8x. So we can say that according to part A, this equals cosine of 8x, and this equals, on the right side we have cosine of g of x. And so therefore both sides we have a cosine function, and this means the inner part of the cosine functions should also be equal. That is, we say that 8x equals g of x. Otherwise we say that g of x equals 8x. So we have determined that g of x equals 8x.